my wife and I retired about 3 or 4 years ago, and through our life we've been working in all sorts of organisations to do with the sorts of issues we're dealing with now.
Living here with 2 of my children and 2 of my grandchildren. So I'm a grandmother, and I get involved in help in a number of different campaigns across issues which are connected. It was also a part of the government policy to try to encourage companies of Australia to become part of the weapons industry. So when you walk inside this expo, the very first thing you see is the big display of the Queensland government. They are really happy to encourage more defense industries, weapons industries, give people money to come to Brisbane, set up a factory there, get more young people like yourself and younger people into defense. But it wasn't really set up for a public to go in and have a nice day with the children. It was a little bit different. So, but what we found talking to people in the street, walking past, is when they said, "What's in there? What's in that building?" We said, "It's a weapons expo." What? Can't be. How can that be? How is that possible? That's terrible. So some of the public walking past were shocked to think that it was happening there, and were surprised and didn't really know much. So I think some people are fine. Yes, weapons are great. We have to have wars. But a lot of people were not pleased once they found out what was going on, because it wasn't really publicized to the public. It was more for the people inside. Also, that the Rheinmetall tanks were being used to transport the Indonesian army and secret police into West Papua, really to kill West Papuans. So I walked around and I saw that, and I sat there for a while. What will I do? What will I do? Then I remembered I had a bottle of water, but I had some makeup. So I put the makeup in the water. So I had a paint to throw. Anyway, yeah. Then gave a big speech.
I climbed up on the Hanwha tank, and then we were followed by, these 2 old people were followed by 15 or 20 young people who took over the German one. You know, Korea is basically a peaceful country. As I don't know a lot about Korean history, but I know enough to know that it's not, you don't generate world wars. You don't start world wars. You are the victim of a lot of hostility from others. I just couldn't make sense of why were the Koreans sending tanks. And then it became clear that it was because there was a contract going for Australian Army. Not a huge contract. I think it was $80 million. That can't be big in Hanwha's terms. But what began to worry me when I thought about that is, like Rheinmetall, they're taking up the offer that Miriam was talking about to come to Australia to start building up the arms industry. So I'm quite sure Hanwha wasn't there just to sell a few tanks to the Australian government. I'm quite sure Hanwha was there to move into the Australian arms industry, to start by selling arms to the Australian government, but then to start building arms for perhaps for the Australian Army first to move on to places like Indonesia, pass on to Indonesia or elsewhere.
While we were there, they were probably killing people, transporting soldiers to places where they could kill people right in the moment when we're inside. And we are really aware in Australia of what's going on right near Australia, which is in West Papua, which is a province of Indonesia. But what is happening to the people there? Yeah, so and for both of us, we are made to do something. You have to say something. You can't go in and leave without doing something or saying something, because you just go a bit crazy if you don't.
One of the things that worked very well in that there was no violent action. They were all non-violent. But some of the things that worked best was when the public saw that there were people in the protests who were there singing songs, clearly enjoying themselves, celebrating life. There was very witty things going on, like grand dinners, you know, when all of the generals were in having their big dinner. The wage priest organised a gala dinner of its own. So part of what worked was not so much the actual confrontation, which is really scary. It's actually showing people that there's a better way of living and that the people who share that positive energy about peace are better, more pleasant people to be with than the dreadful people who were locked away in that horrible building. Because when I was up on that tank, I knew that if I got up without having my words clear in my mind, then I'd forget and I'd get, you know, anxious and I'd lose my voice. So that's why I wrote them out. But when I read this poem out to them, everyone stopped. People listen when they think somebody's got something specific to say, you know. And as I began to talk, I thought, I'm not going to be able to get through this. My voice is going to give up. But there was such a silence and people were so keen to listen that it was easy for me to read. And I think this goes back to what we've been talking about, that I'm sure the army generals weren't convinced, but a lot of the people who were there, as Miriam says, it made them think, and it went to them as human beings and as people who had grandfathers who also stood on tanks, or grandmothers who threw makeup at unmanned vehicles, and that makes people think.
And yeah, and there's different ways. Like on one night, we had a vigil for to talk about the children killed in Palestine, which had happened not long before. So on the big wall, you'll see in the film, on the big wall were projected the pictures of each child. Then the name was read out of the child and the age, and all of us repeated the name and we held candles. It was just completely silent. In the reading of the names, everybody was still, and it was obvious that the police and some of the people there coming down were also affected by that too. So that was a really strong moment.
Thanks.
That was very, because the children, you know, like there was a couple of children that had the same name as me, because it's a common name. Yeah, it's a common name there in Palestine, Miriam. It was a little girl, like 6 years old. So it was, everybody was very emotional. So I think it was a powerful, really powerful moment.
It might not make any difference this year, but it'll continue to make a difference, because human beings always win over. People who have human values always in the long term. And Miriam and I have seen the long term. We're still there.
There's a lot of people in the middle that can be ready to hear a different story and can move towards that better story. That's what we hope to do. We hope to help people who are in the middle, maybe to move, like Julian saying, the people in there who didn't know they had a choice what to do, to help them to move towards the peaceful side. Yeah. The people at the other end, we may not ever change the general, but these people in the middle, I think we can start to move them. Yeah. Hopefully. I hope that you can bring people together for this action that you're going to do. And it's the beginning of more, and it's the beginning of shifting the thinking of people, particularly of young people and children, because that's my greatest concern as a former teacher, that children in the education system are being drawn into this idea of military and defense as a way to live and to have a job, and they're being pushed into that. Like it's a very fun and exciting thing. Wow, drones, go to space, go to Mars, shoot people. That's a thing I'm very concerned about in Australia. So hopefully some of what you do, that message will also go to the children and the families and try to get people to think beyond this.
I think the Korean people and the Australian people and the people of the world have no need for war. I think arms dealers have a need for war because they'll profit from that. I think governments have a need for war because that's the easiest way that they can see to preserve their position. But I think the people of the world want governments to find ways to organise the world so it can move together in peace and doesn't need and can put the money that's going into the arms into the things that support peace, like equality and health and housing and shelter and fighting climate change.